All right, so last week we went over Node. This week we're gonna go over excuse me, phone's going off. Let me just put that on silent. And this week we are gonna go over MongoDB and Mongoose, how to connect to it, and some basic queries that we can run, and what Mongo generally is. So let me get my screen shared. So I'll post this link, but we're going to be using a service called MongoDB Atlas. MongoDB Atlas. And this is a hosting service. Yeah. So once you get to this page, and I'll go ahead and post this in the advanced channel, you can go ahead and put in your first, last name, don't worry about company, or put BDPA, email, and password, and you'll create your Atlas account. Now, I've already got one, so I'll just log into mine. But once you get this done, you don't have to give it a credit card or do anything like that. You'll get marketing emails, but nothing too bad. It'll tell you you'll get like articles on Mongo, like how to use it better and stuff. So that's not really a marketing email, but let me know when everyone has an account. I'll log into mine and we'll spin up our first database. And it's important that you do the exact things that I'm doing, because there's one type of database that's a free tier. It gives you like 512 megabytes, which isn't a whole lot, but for a demonstration app, or even the app we'll be building for BDPA during the competition, it's pretty good. Half a gig, and I forgot what its latency is, but it's not super terrible. Obviously for a production app, you don't want to use the free database, but Mongo is also available as a Docker image, which we're not going to be messing with Docker in this class, but that's something I should definitely encourage everyone to look into. Docker is a way to create a virtual machine that'll allow you to have multiple iterations of your app on a single machine. Or actually, well, that's true, but that's not quite what the advantage is. It's also so that you don't have to set up the environment in your on your machine every time you launch your app. What I mean is, you'd have to download Node, you have to download Mongo, you have to download all sorts of stuff, whereas you can just create a Docker image that has all that stuff on board and deploy that. The machine itself that it's running on only needs Docker installed. It doesn't need anything else. But I'm going off topic. Let us know if you have not yet made a Mongo account. I'm just going to go ahead and log into mine. Sign in. I actually have two accounts. Pretty sure I'm going to give it the right one. Yeah. I have one through OMSL as well. I see nothing in the chat, so I assume everyone's got their so I've got one cluster. I actually don't want to delete this because I do have some data in here that I like. But when you go onto your page, you're going to have no clusters. I have cluster 0. This is my free tier. So I'm going to go ahead and create. I'm not going to go through with actually creating it, but you could see that I've got the free one and it's got 144 megs in it. So go ahead and click the create button. And by default, everything it selects should already be the free cluster. You should be on a shared, actually, is where it probably should be. It doesn't matter which provider and region you use. It matters a little bit, but you might as well just leave the default. North Virginia for AWS is always a good choice. And that's the closest to us anyway, physically, assuming everyone's in St. Louis. Cluster tier. So you've got a couple of choices. There's M0 Sandbox, which is the free version. Again, it's shared RAM. Yeah, I've already hit my limit, but shared RAM, the storage is 512 megs. CPU is also shared, and the price is free forever. Yay. Although I'm wondering if It should be selected to shared for you already. If it's not, whatever. And cluster name, that doesn't matter that much. You could just leave it as cluster 0. This is only important for when it shows up on your dashboard. So once you're done, go ahead and click create cluster. And it's going to take a minute to actually, spin everything up. And I'm not going to do it again because I don't want to pay anything. And my credit card actually is on the site, so they would charge me. But it'll take a minute. It'll provision memory space just for your database and do all that fun stuff. It'll probably take roughly 5 minutes. But once your database is created, we're going to go to database access. You should be able to do this right now. I'm not sure, but we'll just do this now. Database access. I've already got a user created. You should be able to alter this before your database is spun up, because this is just a settings file that it's going to be, that's probably already been created. But add new database user. And you can do authentication method of password, certificate, or IM, assuming you're in AWS. Just for simplicity, we're going to keep it as a password. You're going to give it a username and a password. And I highly suggest, because Mongo Atlas is pretty secure, but don't use a password that you use elsewhere. In fact, I would just use 1234 or something, so you don't have to be worried about that. But for me, I have my username for everything is mweinberg21. In fact, I'm actually going to create a new user so that you don't see my password, because I've got a actual password in here. So BPA1, and my password will be 1234. And I'll probably make this temporary. But yeah, I'll want read and write to any database. You could also have Atlas admin, but I highly suggest you don't do that, and only read as well. If this app is only going to read for the database, but we're going to want read and write. So I'm going to keep it as it is. But yeah, you could do like custom roles and specific privileges and all that fun stuff, but we're not going to worry about that. And click add user. Was everyone able to do that?
And he gave a thumbs up.
All right, cool. Now we can go back to our database pane, and if your database is still not set up yet, then we should still be able to do this. We can go back to database access, click on edit, and there should be, oh, you know what? Wrong thing. They changed this up since the last time I did it. How do I get, connect. So you may not have this button yet if your database is still setting up, but you can click connect. And there's going to be a few connection methods. And there's also a link I'm going to send you for Mongo Compass, which is a desktop app that allows you to see everything that you're doing. But we're going to select connect your, well, we'll do Compass first, because it's going to give us a, it looks like a URL, it's slightly different, but it is a connection string is what it's called. So we're going to go to connect using MongoDB Compass, and it should give you a download link actually right here. So I'm not even going to send this, but I've already got it downloaded on this machine, I think. Yes, I do. So I've already got it downloaded. Go ahead and download this. And this is your connection string. Now, while you're downloading Compass, we'll just look through this. So we got MongoDB plus serve. That's kind of like HTTP. So that's declaring its protocol. We have username. So it's whatever username that you created. It may already be autofilled for you. I've got 2 users here, so it's not doing that for me, but it might fill in your username here. Password, same thing. It's, well, this one is definitely not going to autofill because of security reasons, obviously. My cluster name, I don't know what this is, mongodb.net. And then this last thing right here, test, is the name of the database. In this case, it'll be test. I'm going to change that to something else. But you can name this anything you want, which is kind of cool. Now, the thing with this though, if you used any special characters in your password, I didn't, so I don't have to worry about this. But this is a URL. So if you have any special characters in here that aren't compatible with HTTP URLs, there's URL encoding that you're going to have to do. So if you have any special characters right now, you may want to go back and change that password to just, numerical or alphanumerical, so that you don't have to worry about this. But that's stuff like if you've got a at sign, then you'll have to change that at to, yeah, you're gonna have to do this. %40, I think, is at. Yeah, it is. Check that out. So if you have a password that looks like this that uses special characters, good for you, because that's what you should be doing. But you'll have to, change it to this, which is annoying. Which, oh, that's cool. All right. Oh, I'm gonna look through this documentation later, but yeah, so go ahead and copy the connection string. And I'm gonna open up our node project that we ran last time, kill this one. I think that was Express demo. So I'm just gonna do this in Express demo, CD Express demo, which is what we worked on last week. Was anyone not here last week? We may just want to spin one up from the top.
I wasn't here last week.
Okay, we could use the practice then. So we'll just create a brand new one again. So to do that, we're gonna make a new folder, McDir, and I'll name this Mongo demo. CD into Mongo demo and do npm init -y. So it answers yes to all the stupid questions it asks you. And creates our package JSON. Cool. And we're gonna download a few things, including npm express. And I'll just copy and paste this into the advanced web channel, but we need express. We need is it called Mongoose? Yeah, Mongoose. Express, Mongoose. I forgot what else we need. I'll just download these for now, and we'll download the others when we get to that. All right, and open in code. Get this other project closed out. There we go. All right, so we should have now our package JSON with Express and Mongoose. We have them in our node modules folder. Looks good to me. And we're going to create two files. One's going to be called app.js and the other will be server.js. App is going to be where Express will be instantiated and all of our routes will be set up, all of our top level routes. And server is what's actually going to make it listen on a port. And we're also going to use server this time for connecting to our Mongo database. So we have them in two separate files for testing purposes. We're not doing automated testing here, but that is still good practice. So app.js and server.js. App.js, this is where we're going to, like I said, spin up our Express server. So const express equals require express and const app equals express as a function. So that'll create our app or our express instance. And by the way, since you weren't here last week, we don't have any fancy transpiling in our node apps. Generally, you can if you want, and that's something called Babel, but it's not worth it, in my opinion, to do all that work just to have import syntax. So this is how we have to import everything. Otherwise, oh, and also exporting, it's going to be module.exports and setting that to something. That's how we're going to export it, and you'll see that in this file. And then we're going to set up a quick little route, app.get ping /ping. We'll give that a function that will return Pong. So request, response, next. We don't even need next, but rest.send Pong. So if you weren't here last week, this is how we generally will set up a route. It's going to be app.get or app.post or app.delete or whatever it is that we're using. We're going to be using get and post pretty much all the time. You should also get familiar with put and some of the others, but for now, this is all we need. You're going to give it a function that takes in 3 parameters: the request object, the response object, and the next function. Next or request is what it sounds like. That is the actual request that we receive, complete with all the headers and the body and whatever, if we so choose to send that. Response is what it's a base response object that Express provides us that we can modify and tell it to do stuff. So by doing rest.send Pong, we're telling the response or we're giving the response object a text field so that when it's sent back to whoever hits this endpoint, that's what they'll get. We can also modify the headers and do some other fancy stuff. And next, this is more for middleware. Good practice to just go ahead and invoke it, but that tells Express that we're done with the response object and everything, and to go ahead and wrap it up. And if there's middleware that we're using, to go ahead and call the next one. But we're just setting this up so that we can verify that Express is up and running and doing what it's supposed to. And once we have this route set up, we can do module.exports equals app. So when you do one of these, a require, this is what it returns. It returns our app, our Express object. And we can also do it like this. We could send it back a object and return app in that as well. So it depends on if you're exporting multiple things, then you're going to want to do this, obviously. But if you're only exporting the one thing like I am here, I'm just going to set this to app. So now we have our Express object that's going to be set up. Let's go to server. We're going to import the Express object that we just created. So const app equals require our app file. And for now, we're just going to do app.listen. There's going to be a callback. This will be when it's done. Or wait, hang on. There's a few overloads. It always confuses me. Let me get that back. Anyway, there's 6 overloads for this. So we're using overload number 3. So we're going to give it a port number. So that's what port that it's going to be listening in on. And the callback function that tells it that, or that will run when it is up and running. So I'm going to do a port of 3001 because our UI runs on port 3000, right? So we don't want them on the same port because then it's not going to be able to spin this up. The OS is going to yell at us for it. And to verify that it is up and running, we're going to make a console statement, console.log app is listening. And what I like to do in general is this port number, I like to assign it to a variable. So const port equals 3001. I'll replace port here and I'll make this a fancy string so that I can throw that in there like this. So we're going to run this real quick, make sure that it's good to go. I'm going to open up Postman. And if you don't have that downloaded, I still have the link. I think I have the link in the advanced web channel. If I don't, I'll just repost it. Yeah, so if you go to Tuesday, May 31st, I posted the link for Postman. You can go ahead and download that. You don't have to make an account. Express, this is the documentation and HTTP cats. We were talking about HTTP codes like 200 and whatnot. And this is a good website that I literally use to reference it because I don't have these memorized. I have a few of them, but we got 200, okay. Yep. And 500 would be, or 401 on auth and all that fun stuff. So this is a fun reference that I like to use. Oh, and there was one more thing, npmi nodemon. Nodemon, Nodemon. This is something that will allow us to so in our UIs, when we're making changes to the UI and it's running, it'll detect that changes have been made and reload the app. That's what Nodemon allows us to do in a lightweight way for our for this app. So now we need to get our script running. So we've got scripts. We only have a test script that just says, we don't have any tests. So we could just delete that and replace it with dev. Nodemon. Node and Nodemon are replacements for each other, but Nodemon will do that code listening thing. So Nodemon server.js. So that we can spin up our server, it'll listen and we can hit the endpoint that we just created, our ping endpoint, to verify that Express is up and running and I didn't screw anything up. So npm run dev. So we're running our dev script. App is listening and it said, and Nodemon is telling us that it's running. It started node server, and we can see that console log I have in our callback fired, and it's saying that it's listening on port 3001. And where is Postman? There's Postman. So this is from last time, but localhost 3001/ping. And I should get back Pong. Perfect. So our node server is up and running. So there's a few more quick things that we need to do in order to get this to be complete. So by default, when we send this request bodies and stuff like that, it won't be in the request object directly. We have to, because it's sent in a separate set of packets, it's essentially sending a document, it's uploading. So in order for us to be able to use that, we want to use some built-in middlewares that Express gives us. So app.use express.JSON, and that is a function. So what this does is it takes in that request body that we're sending that's sometimes sent separately, not sometimes, all the time sent separately, and it's appending it to our request object. So we'll see that in use later. And then there was another thing, app.use express. Forgot what the other one was. Well, we'll figure it out later. But for now, we definitely need JSON. So this will allow us to read response bodies, or rather request bodies. And the other one will let us, oh, you know what? I think we proved last time that we don't need, I was about to say queries, and queries are when you have a URL that looks like this, a question mark and something equals value. So this will get appended to the request query object that will have a key value for, or it's a JSON of something and value. And if you want additional values, use the ampersand, something else equals another value. So we could see that Postman is also using or is also giving us our query params here. So we can, use the checkbox and everything. So that's kind of cool. But this is the object that we would get on our Express end. And then the other thing is a body. And I've already got, this is from last week, but I've got, username Mawine, and it said it's JSON. This part is important. What we just did in our on our Express page is allow us to read the body from a request. Otherwise, this is not in there at all. So we've got that out of the way. Now we can go to server.js, and we've got Mongo installed. So mongoose rather equals require mongoose. We're going to want to set up a database connection here. So mongoose.connect. And this takes in a couple parameters. We've got the URI, so that's the connection string. We've got options, which for now we can just leave that as an empty object. And we have a callback. And this is going to call once Mongo is connected to our database. So I need to go back to get mine. And I like to do this as well. So const connection string equals quote this. Now, this is a secret. Obviously, you don't want this in Git because people are going to hack into your database and do stuff with it. So there's another thing that I actually forgot about last time called .env. We're going to mess with that a little later. So if you have a Git repo that you've set up that you keep all your code in, maybe don't commit it yet because you don't want this connection string up in your Git log because someone's going to break into your database and do bad stuff with it. Now, I already forgot what my username and password that I set up was BDPA1, and I think I set the password. Yeah, we're just gonna 1, 2, 3, 4. Update. I think that's what it was, but I don't remember. So BDPA1 and 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm gonna replace username BDPA1 and password 1, 2, 3, 4. And my database name is just going to be BDPA. So we're going to feed that connection string as the first parameter here. We're going to give it an empty object for options because at the moment we don't really have any. And we can also give a callback, but we do want some options in here that I will have to look up. But so this callback with result, there's going to be an error object that it's going to be provided. So I'm just going to do ERR. And error will be, I believe, null if there is no error and it connected successfully. So we need to check to make sure if error console log something bad happened. And otherwise else, we can copy app.listen underneath this else because we don't want this to start listening before the database is even ready because that could cause some issues in a production environment. When you do a redeployment, you would rather have the app just simply not listening at all than to take requests and then send back 500s, right? And in an ideal world, you're going to have what's called blue-green deployment. That's when you replace one version of your app with another without any downtime, or at least as little downtime as humanly possible. And that is where you have your app running. It'll spin up your brand new app. It'll keep your old app running. Once the brand new app is up, it's going to delete the old one and it's going to listen on that port. That's what blue-green deployment is called. But anyway, while you're deploying this, you do not want it accepting requests. So we're going to grab our app.listen here and paste it inside of this else. And I'm also going to have a little console. I don't need another console. Once app is listening, once I see this in the console, then I'll know that the connection worked. So this is running NodeMon, so we are actually connected to our database. Are there any questions? Did anybody get our bad console log? I see nothing in the chat. I'm hearing no voices. Everyone is here. Great. So now we can take a look at our database and do some basic stuff. So if you haven't already, go ahead and download MongoDB Atlas. And I am going to be right back. Back to it. So I'm going to open up Mongo Compass. And we're going to give it this exact same connection string. I already have. There we go. So when you first open MongoDB Compass, you're going to have a new connection. I've got an old connection here, but that's for a database elsewhere. Actually, no, this is the same database because I just made a different user for it. But I'm already going to have a bunch of tables in here. You will not. But connect. All right, so I've got a personal project that lives in here, so I'm just going to create a new one. In fact, I think, yeah, I set it to BDPA, but you don't even need to do that. So if you've ever worked with or are somewhat familiar with databases in general, you're probably familiar with SQL. And databases like that, you have to set up your tables ahead of time. You have to create your schema ahead of time, all that fun stuff. But the beauty of Mongo is that it's a NoSQL database. You do not have to set up tables. It's document based, meaning that every single document can look completely different than other documents. Like they don't have to follow a specific schema. But that is something that we're using Mongoose for. Mongoose will allow us to define a schema, and it's going to be enforced on our app rather than inside our database. And the cool thing about that is you can edit your schema right in your code. You never have to open up a connection to your database. We're only opening up Compass so that we can make a couple of documents to start with and what the basic query structure looks like. So we're going to go ahead and create database, and the database name is just going to be BDPA. And the collection name, I'm going to go ahead and make that BDPA as well. So create database. The database itself, so I've got two different databases in here, and you may also see local and admin. Don't touch either of those. But these two databases I have here are simply, these are the names of the database, right? And that's referenced in our connection string. Now we did connect, but we don't have any documents. So Mongo didn't feel the need to create that database for us just yet because we didn't put anything in there. In fact, once I'm done with this, I'm going to go ahead and delete this database, and then we'll run Mongo and we'll see once we have documents created, it's actually going to create this for us. We don't have to tell it to. And this, I didn't really need to do this, but collections are basically your tables, if you're familiar with SQL. A collection is a set of documents that, share something in common. Maybe instead of BDPA, I can rename this. Can I rename this? Yeah, no, I'm just going to drop this. Maybe I have a collection of, oh, crap. Okay, well, once it's got nothing in there, it'll just delete the database as it turns out. So I'm going to name the collection students.
Hey, Mike, C4 asked a question in the chat.
Oh, what was the question? How does that work when you access properties that exist on new documents, but not old ones? Awesome question. So because it doesn't, that's one of the downsides. So because it doesn't have that property, that's going to come back as undefined. So you're going to have to write your app to be able to compensate for that. On the other hand, you can also write a quick script that'll take all of your documents and append that new property to them. There's two different ways to do it. In production, obviously, that's not as great, but we want to write our app to be resilient to those changes. So yeah, awesome question. Whereas in a SQL database, if you need to add a new row, then you'd actually have to manually go into the database, create that new, not row, that new column, and add those values or leave them as null. I think Postgres by default just has them empty. So you'd have to do that either way. But that's something we take care of in Mongoose. Awesome question though. So I'm going to create a collection called students, create database. So students, and again, these may not all look the same. Mongo doesn't enforce it, but they may have fields such as, in fact, let's just add it. So insert document, you're going to click add data, insert document. And it's got this ID thing here by default. That's something that Mongo rather uses to track these documents. Don't mess with this. But otherwise, you can add new keys like name, and that will be of type string. How do I do this? String. No, wait, it doesn't have. Wait, how does this work? Oh, this is a document. Hang on, I was thinking of a schema in Mongoose. So the name would be like Mike. The course, not course. I don't want course. Let's do first name Mike and last name Weinberg, and we'll just leave it at that. But that's how you insert documents, and this is proper JSON, quote unquote. So you have to have the quotes, the double quotes. You can't have a comma on the last, although I think, yeah, look at that. So you can't have a comma on the last thing. And you can have all sorts of different data types in here. You can have nested objects for each of these keys. You could have arrays, all that fun stuff. It supports all of it. You don't want really go nested. as much as possible because that'll make your schema really weird to work with, but otherwise everything's fair game. So I'll just insert that document and we can see that we have first name and last name in here. And we can edit this as well. So yeah, I just edit and I can change this to Nico. And what's your last name?
Stranquist, STRANQUIST.
That's right. And updates. So I just changed the record. And then I can copy the record. So copy document and insert. Whoa, that's not what I wanted. Oh, that copies the ID too. That's stupid. But yeah, I could copy the documents and get rid of the parts that I don't want in here. I don't know what errors it contains. I'm just going to cancel, screw it. But you can copy the document, clone, that's what I wanted. So it'll copy over the schema and create a new cloned document. And these object IDs are going to be different. And because these are JSON objects, the keys may be in a different order. So that doesn't really matter considering that they're objects, but that's why that's happening. So now we can do a find. Find is the, oh, and you know what? I'm going to do this Mongoose query. So Mongoose's queries map pretty closely to what Mongo itself uses. It's pretty much one-to-one. Mongoose, I believe, is third party. They're not the people from Mongo, but Mongo, they do work closely with these folks. In fact, I think Mongo, they even recommend this because I actually talked to some Mongo people at Bayer when we were thinking about using a Mongo database, which was pretty cool. Like their customer service is awesome, by the way, but they actually recommended that we use this. So these are the different queries that we have available to us. The one that we're going to be using right now immediately is find. And find simply, it finds everything that matches criteria we give it. If we do a find with an empty object, maybe don't do this in a production environment because your database may be huge, but this will return all documents in a certain model, which we'll create shortly. And you can also do fancy stuff like if we've got ages in there, then we can use greater than or equal, less than or equal. These I always have to look up, but there are these fancy functions that we can use, and you don't need exec anymore. Is this? Yeah, you don't need exec. I've never had to use it, but that's there. What else? And then you can also use regex. I'm not going to do that because I don't hate myself enough, but there's also some options you can give find. You can skip the first 10. In fact, they are in Compass. If I were to select options, there's this is in other databases, this is called an offset, but skip the first 10 that come back and only return the first 20 that come back. So if I do a limit of 1 and my filter is just an empty object, I could find it'll only return the first one that comes back. The only problem with that is that you would want to do a sort with limit, because if this database is updated, it'll add it at the very top, if I'm not mistaken, and it's going to end up skipping that one. So you would want to add a sort of some kind. So I'm going to go back to returning all of them. Oh, and if you put a limit of 0 and skip 0, it's gonna, limit of 0 will just return all of them. So, because it doesn't make sense to just return nothing. But in order to sort, let's say this is already sorted by last name, but let's say I want to sort this by last name. L name is -1. That says sort descending, I think. So I'm actually going to end up being first. Yeah. So this is descending, meaning the first or the highest value down to the lowest value. And when we're talking about strings, W, that has a value of whatever its place in the alphabet is. So that would have a higher value than S. So that's what that means. And if I want it in ascending order, lowest value first, I would put in a 1, and that's how I would sort it. Now for the filter, it's pretty verbose. It's pretty nice. I don't know why I put a period there, but let's say I want to return everyone whose first name is Nico. I only have one record, so I'm actually gonna clone this, and like put my brother in here or something for last name, but you get the idea. It'll return every document that matches this. And I'm gonna add our ages in here too, actually, so I can demonstrate, greater than or equal to and all that fun stuff. So I'm gonna add Nico's age, here, so age. And this is going to be a number. So we will assign this to int 64. How's that? 64 bits is kind of a lot for this, but whatever. I'm going to assume you're like 25 or something. I don't actually know. And I'm going to put mine in as, I've been 27 for 3 years now. I've not accepted that I just turned 30. No, I'm 27. How's that? So we can return everyone whose age is greater than or equal to 25. That'll obviously return both. If I put 26, it's just going to return me. So age, and this is where this gets a little weird, but anytime we have a I don't know what to call this. It's more or less it's a comparator, I suppose. So it calls it something different in the docs. I'll get back to you on that. But if I want everyone whose age is less than or equal to, I would do $, and it gives you all of them when you put $. So there's a lot of them to choose from. But we're going to use greater than or equal to. There's also LT and LTE. There it is, LT and LTE. It doesn't say what these actually are, which is unfortunate, but you could find it in the documentation. Mongoose. So we'll do less than, and we'll do less than 20, less than 205, but less than 25. So it's going to return neither of us. Less than or equal to 25 is less than or equal to 25. And same thing with greater than or equal to and greater than. So that's one of them. There are others in here like aggregate, I think it's called. No, it's not aggregate. I don't know where to find those. GTE. Query prototype. That's not great. I don't know where to find all those, but I don't think I've used anything other than greater than or equal to or less than. So if the need arises, we'll come back to it, but there's always Stack Overflow. So that's how queries generally work. So we've got the find that we just demonstrated. And queries. We got the find that we just demonstrated. We can also find a very specific one by the ID. So which, you know, is something we're going to want to do. So if we've got these IDs, we can do a find by ID, give it this, it's just going to return the 1 because these IDs are going to be enforced unique. And then there's find by ID and delete, find by ID and remove. For our purposes, there's not really much of a difference, but feel free to read the documentation. I believe remove is a soft delete. Here we go. Remove is a soft delete, so it doesn't actually remove it from the database, but it makes it not readable, I suppose. And delete is a hard delete. It just gets rid of it. There's also find one. So if you give it one of those queries, it'll just return the first one. This is one that I don't really like to use because our documents can be in any order, really. So it'll just return the first one, which isn't super ideal. Find one and delete, same thing. Remove, replace are, oh, interesting. Well, there's find by ID and update, which is another one we're going to be using a lot. And obviously, if I want to change someone's first name or last name because maybe somebody got married, then I would use a find by ID and update. And the query I would give it is whatever their new last name is. Replace one, update many. This is another good one where this would be one we could use in a script if we were to add a new property to our model. If we add a new property to our model or schema, we would probably want to populate it. So we could use update many, you know, where new property equals null. We could change it to whatever value we're going to change it to. So that's something that's pretty useful. And there's also delete many. So everyone whose first name is Mike, we want to get them out of our database because we have a new no Mike policy. I don't know, something like that. So I'll go ahead and link this in our Slack. And now that we're familiar-ish with these queries, we still need a model in order to create our schema. So model. Yeah, so this is a simple example, but a model is, again, our schema, and it's going to be provided with the name of the property, and the value is going to be our type. So that would be, in this case, it's a string. There's also number. There's aggregate types we can give it. There's enums that we can use. There's a lot of good stuff that we can use to set our schema and actually enforce it using Mongoose so that we don't accidentally give it any bad data. So let's do that now. So back in our project, I usually like to store these all in one folder. So right click, new folder, models. And we're going to create our first model, and that'll probably be, let's just use employee or something. So employee model.js. So we have to import a few things. Const mongoose equals require mongoose, first thing we need. And we're going to create schema. Let me see. I haven't done this in a minute. So mongoose.model. Let me see. It's going to be the name of the model. And oh, you know what? Never mind. I want to create the schema first. I like to separate these. That's what I was forgetting. So const employee model, and just out of schema, sorry. Just out of habit, I like to name these with capital letters at the beginning. That's just my personal preference. I don't know why I do it. I think I saw an example where it did this when I was learning how to do it, and it just stuck with me. So equals new mongoose.schema. And that's going to be an object. So this will be a representation of the documents that we were going to have in here. So the keys name, and we're going to have that as a string. In fact, I'm going to do F name for first name and L name for last name. And right now it is probably going to highlight for me in a couple places because I have like a spell checker on board. So if you see something underlined and it's not underlined for you, that's probably going to be why. So we have first name, last name, age, and that'll be a number, and title. That'll be a string, and so on. And we'll leave it at that for now. And we can go a little bit deeper. So right now, all of these are, I think by default, they are not required. But we want each of these fields to be required, right? So instead of declaring it, F name string, L name string, we can do some stuff to enforce a little consistency in our data. But before we get to that, we also want to create our model out of the schema. So const employee model equals mongoose.model. The name of the model. So this will essentially be the name of the table. So what shows up here, I put students here. This would be the name of the model as far as Mongoose is concerned. So I'm going to rename that to employees or employee, because Mongoose will actually be smart enough to name the table employees for plural, because it's a collection, and singular, of course, is just a single object. And we're going to give it our new schema. So employee schema module.exports equals, and we're just going to export the model. In the rest of our code, we won't need to worry about the schema. We'll just need the model, because the model itself is going to be the one that has the find, the delete many, and all those functions that we looked at in the documentation. So now we want to do some enforcement here. So F name, instead of string, we're going to give it an object type. will be string because we still want it to be a string. Required is true. So that sets our first name to be required. So if we attempt to insert a new document in code that doesn't have a first name property, it's going to get mad at us. And C4 asks, what about if it's an irregular plural? Is there a way to override? What do you mean by irregular plural? Oh, so like geese. I don't know. That's a good question. I kind of want to see, so I'm going to rename this to Goose and see if it says geese in our database. It might say gooses. I have no idea. It might just add an S at the end. But either way, it will change it to a plural, whether it's correct or not. I don't know. It's gonna be fun to find out. If this says geese, I'm gonna laugh really hard. But anyway, now I want to show you enums. In fact, let's look at number first. So age, number. So obviously it's impossible for someone to be negative 11 years old, and it's impractical for somebody to be older than 100, let's say. You know, maybe y'all live to more than 100. I probably won't, but we can add an upper and lower bound. So type is number, and I believe it's simply just min and max. So min, yep, look at that. Min is 1. Or as an employee, maybe our policy is to only hire people 18 and up. So I could put 18. Child labor laws are ruining this country. I'm gonna edit that part out for YouTube. That was a joke from what show was that? My ADD is kicking in, and we'll have a max value of 100. So if we attempt to add a document where age is less than 18 or over 100, it's going to yell at us. It's going to throw an exception. And there's also enum. So you can have a list of accepted values. Maybe there's only so many job titles that we have in our company for this database. So again, we're going to make this an object. Type is string, and enum. Enum is however or whatever the accepted list of values are. So in this case, we might have an engineer. We might have a product owner. And we might have a designer. And obviously there could be more. There may be so many we don't want to have in as an enum, but this is just to show you that we can do this. Now there's one last thing, and I'll just change this to required string as well. Now there's one more thing that we can add. So if we want to add a default value, that's what I wanted. So we can have a default value in here of whatever. So maybe we can have, and I'll do that with date. So updated. So default value can either be a hard-coded value of some kind, or it could be a function in order to obtain that value. So in this case, updated date, or maybe last updated. Let's do last updated. But I don't want to have to provide a date, provide a date every single time we add in a new, or you know what? How about hired? Because updated would imply that every time I do make an update to this document, this field will get updated, which isn't true. We'll do hired. So the day they were added to the database. So this will be a type of date, and required is true. But we don't want to have to calculate whatever the current date is every time we add a new document. We want Mongoose to do that for us. So we can have a default value of date. I forgot how to do this. New date without invoking it. I'm pretty sure that's it. Anyway, if we invoke it, then that'll cause a problem. Every record that's added to the database will have a date of when this schema was actually created. So this default value is basically date. So we don't want it to have these parentheses so that it has to run this, because this is essentially a function right now. In fact, I could probably just get rid of this. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But we can give it a function that calculates the new date. In fact, let's just make this easier on ourselves. Const get current date. That's a function and it'll return new dates. How about that? And then we can add that function here without invoking it. So that every time we add a new document, it'll call this function, and that's what the default will be set to, so that we don't have to provide hired in our queries when we're creating a new record. Does that make sense? Take that as yes. All right, so now let's make our first endpoint that'll create a new employee. So we can go to app. Actually, I'm going to create a new file for this or new folder called services. And I'll make a file called employee. And this is just where all of our employee related services are going to be. And I will also want to create a folder called controllers, but we'll just create our first one and then we'll split it up into a controller for time's sake. So we're going to import that model that we just created. Const employee model equals require. We'll go to models folder, employee model. And we're going to create our endpoint function. So const creates employee equals function with request, response, and next. And we're going to grab all this data directly from the body. Mongoose kind of makes that easy on us, and we just have to be sure to supply that data when we hit our endpoint in Postman. So const new employee equals rec.body. And I'm not going to worry about breaking out all of the different things like the first name, last name, etc. I'm just going to give our model this employee object that we fed. For security purposes, this is not a good idea, but for learning, that's what we're going to do. And it's easy. So, oh, and you know what? This is asynchronous. Async. So we're going to do await employee model dot insert. Oh no, hang on. I'm thinking of many. So you can insert many documents this way, or you can create const new employee equals new crap. I'm going to keep doing this. Employee model. And it's a function that we can add our rec.body directly to. So that's how I'm going to do this. So create that new record, and then we'll need to save it. So await new employee dot save. And we could do a rest dot send save. So pretty simple, right? Module dot exports equals create employee. Oh, and also next. I always forget to do this. Would invoke next to let Express know that we are done. And also, this has the potential to bug out, in which case it would crash the app, but I'll show you that in a second. So we should have this restarted. Now I just need to attach this to an endpoint. So we'll go to app, const create employee equals require services slash employee. And we'll attach it to a post request. And I'll show you how to make a post request. But app.post slash creates employee. And we'll just give it that function. So what'll happen is in Postman, we're going to hit the create employee endpoint. It's going to hit that. And you know what? Because I'm intending this to be a file that'll contain all the employee related crap. We're going to do this. So we can export several. We have a problem here where it doesn't know, where create employee is. So we have to destructure it here. So just like that. So now it should be running again without any issues. It is. So it's going to create that new employee model, and then it's going to save it. And it should send back saved. And we should be able to go into Mongoose and see that the new database is the new collection is created. Hopefully it'll be named Geese, and it'll have that new record in there. So I'm going to want to reference our model when I make this request. So in Postman, on the left side, we're going to select post instead of get. We're going to replace this with creates employee. And you're going to want to select body, raw, and change this to JSON if you have not already. And we're going to create our new employee record here. So F name equals Mike. L name is Weinberg. Age is 27. Living in denial. Title is engineer. And I'm not going to give it hired. It should autofill that with the current date when I create this record. So now I can go ahead and click send, and I should get back the word saved. Awesome. Now we can go in Mongoose and we can hit this reload button up here. Oh, look at that. It actually did. Oh, look at that. That's kind of cool. So I guess it works with the regular plurals. That's awesome. So anyway, we see that my record is in there. Now, if I were to add a bad record, so if I excluded, or you know what, I have an upper bound of age, I'll put 127, and it'll actually crash our app because I don't have a try catch around it, but you'll see that Mongoose is enforcing our upper and lower bounds. And I can do the same thing for title and all that fun stuff. So again, I'm going to crash the app. NodeMon will probably restart it. There we go. Look at that. So we see that validation failed age is more than the maximum allowed. So we can see that our schema is being enforced using Mongoose. And it'll do the same thing if I give it a bad title or if I don't include F name and L name. So that's nice. And then of course I can make a field optional by doing required false. But you get the idea. So now we need a try catch around that so it doesn't crash our app, because when I send another request, just the wrong one. When I send a request just to the ping endpoint, nothing's going to happen. Connection refused because the app is crashed. So we can do a try catch around this. Grab all this code and put it inside try. And on catch, it can do a rest.status. And I forgot what bad request is, but luckily I have HTTP cats to help me. HTTP.cats, I think, yeah. So bad request is 400. So rest.status 400.send you're missing something. And I'll have to oh, it already did, cool. So I'll go ahead and do the send again, and it should say you're missing something. It won't crash the app, all is good. And if I add another record with myself in it, that's the only thing, it doesn't do any dedupe. So we can do that now. Well, I'll save that for later because I don't know how to do a unique against multiple values. I have to look that up, and for time's sake, we're just not going to do that. But it will add another record in here if we hit this endpoint again. So refresh, and I see that there's two of me. So I'll just delete one of them. In fact, I'm going to make an endpoint to delete them. So const delete employee equals async rec res next. And we can do a direct await, or rather, I'm going to make this a query so we can see what that looks like. So const doomed employee equals rec.query.id. And make sure we have something so that if it's undefined, then it's not going to do anything. So if doomed employee rest.send no employee ID next. And I like to do a return statement here just to exit this function entirely, because otherwise it's going to keep running. But if it's there, we can do a await employee model dot delete, or find by ID and delete, I think. Find by ID and delete. I'll just name this doomed employee ID instead. And we'll just give it the ID. And then we can do rest.send employee deleted and next. Employee deleted. All right, and then I'm going to export this go to our app, we're gonna import it. And we're gonna do app.delete. Delete employee. So this relies on a query, so we're not going to be sending it a body, and we're going to select delete in that dropdown instead. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to create an endpoint to return all employees as an array. So const get employees equals async rec res next. And we're going to do const employees equals await employee model dot find. And we'll just give it an empty object because we want it to return all of them. And also there's something kind of annoying that Mongoose does. I'll show you what that looks like, and then I'll show you how to fix it. So we'll just do rest.send employees just directly. We'll add again employees to the exports. We'll import it into app, and I'll just put it at the beginning. And we'll do app.get employees and our get employees function. So that should be good to go. There shouldn't be any issues. So we'll go to Postman and we'll hit the employees one first. So employees. Get. Change that to get. Do that again. There we go. So it returns, it doesn't really show here actually. It cleans them up before it sends, but it sends a weird structure to us that is kind of hard to tell because technically these aren't JSON objects. It's a, well, here it is, but in memory, when we're actually accessing these records, they're actually should return, it returns a model type, which is an extension of JSON. That's not exactly how it works, but it's pretty much a super or a subclass of JSON. So it also returns all of these IDs and the version, which we don't necessarily want to send back to the end user. So we can do, in order to clean up the, just return an actual JSON object, we could do .lean. And that'll actually make this query a little bit faster. It's not going to be noticeable here, but when you have a crap load of data, just return it to JSON, because on Mongo's side, it's creating those model objects to send back to us. We don't want all that stuff. We just want the actual JSON objects. So we would chain the .lean function. And when we do that, we're still going to get, I think we're still going to get ID and version, but it's going to run ever so slightly unnoticeably faster because we only have 2 records. And we can also remove the version and the ID if we want. Well, we should keep the ID because we're relying on that to be the ID for the actual employee. But dots, I forgot what it's called. Dots. Oh, well, this is an array now, so I want to do this beforehand. What was that called? Where you return or where you exclude certain properties? I am blanking on this. Richa, Nico, do you know what I'm talking about?
You want to filter certain properties from JSON?
Yeah, I want to remove, I don't want to edit the JSON. There's something built in here that allows me to just only include certain keys or exclude others.
I can look it up.
You know what I'm talking about? I'm forgetting.
Filter.
Let's see, that was.
Find one. You can pass it as an option.
Delete.
Find. Yeah,
Oh,
in the find.
that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, so it's in here, so it's not chain. So it is that's projection. That's not what I want. What does that look like? Is it just a string?
yeah, it's a string. Put in the Stack Overflow. This should be up to date, but well, this is a little bit dated.
Well, we'll see. Anyway, so
We'll see.
what I'm telling it is I could either only include certain things. So I'll just put F name, And I will run this real quick to see what it returns, and should only return the first names. It'll also return the ID by default. And if I want to exclude things, I can put a minus sign in front of it, and I can get rid of that dash or underscore version, or maybe it's one. I guess we'll find out. So that it excludes version. So I only want certain properties to come back. So that's how we can get rid of that. We leaned it so that it's just the JSON object that it ultimately returns, which causes issues when you try to, edit them. Such as when you do a map function or something, it is a superset of JSON, but sometimes weird crap happens. So you want to lean it as much as possible, and it'll make your queries that much faster when you have a lot of data anyway. Now we can do delete employees. So I've got that duplicate version of myself in the database. I want to get rid of it. So I can hit the delete employee endpoint. Remember, we made it a query. So, and I think I named it, let's see, what did I name it? Just ID. So question mark ID equals the ID of the employee we want to delete. ID equals, and I'll paste that in. Once I do
Posted in the
that,
chat.
what's that?
Sorry, I posted in the chat.
Oh,
how
what
you do it.
that's gonna look like. Oh yeah, so I gave it that query param of ID. In fact, let's test to make sure that it can that it returns what it's supposed to if I don't provide this. And also change this to delete, because this is a different protocol. No employee ID, cool. So that did exactly what I wanted it to do. Now I can do ID equals and the ID I want to delete. Employee deleted, hooray. And I can go back to employees to verify that it was deleted. Yes, so now there's only one record of me. Perfect. So is everyone up on what's going on here? Any questions? So we got 10 minutes left, so I want to go over that removing the header thing that I talked about. So if we go into Postman and we look at the headers that were returned, or this is the request headers down here, these are the response headers. So we have X powered by Express. Now I'm a cybersecurity guy, so I see that and red flags go off. I now know that it's a Node.js Express project, and this is a jumping off point for me to exploit this app in some way, because maybe there's a vulnerability, a 0-day that I happen to know about for Express. And if it's not Express, it's going to be whatever tech is running that's serving up our web page. It's annoying that they do this, to be honest, because they really shouldn't, but we're going to make a middleware that will remove this. So I can do that by creating a fancy little middleware, app.use, and it'll just be given a function rec res next. And here I can do rec.headers, or I could console log the headers real quick. And I actually don't want the request, I want the response headers. And I'll just add next at the bottom of this. So we're going to console log all the headers and see what that looks like. So I'll just get my employees list. Undefined, that's not right. Response dot maybe it's just headers. Headers sent. I don't like that either, but that might be what it is. No.
Just look for a header.
I can't
But
remember if this is if it's a function or if it's just an object. So let's see. There we go. All right. So maybe in here somewhere. It's got to be just headers, right?
or there might be a convenience method to get the header, like get header or something. Can you check that?
It would be up here. Yeah, it's not in here. All right. So express request or response object, response headers. Ah, okay, that's annoying. All right, so I want to remove the header, so I'll just do rest.set. Oh, is there a delete? Bet there is. Response. Yeah, so there is headers sent, but it was nothing because we didn't send any headers yet. Rest dot. I want to say there's a delete function because I've done this before, but maybe there isn't. Maybe I could just set it to undefined. I'm gonna do that. So I'm gonna set it to undefined. So rest.set and the header is X powered by, which I'm not a fan of. So I'll just copy this as it is and set it to undefined. Because I don't want that header in there. I don't want to let hackers know what I'm doing here. So now when I do this, I should not see that header. In fact, it's undefined. That's not incredible either. There's got to be a delete one. Or maybe I could set it to null. Whatever, you get the idea. I'll figure that out later and get back to you next class. But basically, the goal is to get rid of that header entirely. And for right now, I'm setting it to undefined. So I've got the goal achieved. Nobody now knows that this is an Express server, and therefore they don't know how to exploit it. There are other ways to figure that out. Oh, rest.remove header. Oh, you are awesome. Rest.remove header. I feel like an idiot. Thank you, Andy. That is awesome. So now when I run this again, it's gone. So yeah, that's one less way that a hacker can figure out how to exploit my app. So that's something I wanted to throw in there just because I feel it's important, and Express, for some stupid reason, includes the powered by. In fact, every other server-side tech will do that stupid thing as well. And a lot of the times, apps like, what am I thinking of now? Nginx, they'll also have those headers, but by default, I believe you could set them to not set that header at all. So in fact, Nginx will actually, Nginx itself is pretty secure. There's still ways to get in there. Of course, it's, you know, any program ever devised, no matter how quote unquote secure it is, there's a way to break it. But Nginx in particular, it's okay if you have the powered by for Nginx itself, because that's what like 80% of the web runs on anyway. But that's one way to remove the header using Express. And if you have an Express server sitting behind Nginx, which really you shouldn't do that, but Nginx will overwrite it as well. So that's kind of a secure way to get rid of that. Apache, most Apache techs will do that as well and replace it with their own powered by headers, but you could set those to remove them as well. But that's just a security thing that I wanted out there. On your final BDPA project for the competition, you really don't need to have this. They're not going to judge it based on its security, because, you know, give me a day, any app you write, I'll be able to break into it. But yeah, anyway, that's all I wanted to go over today. We got the basic query stuff. We didn't do any fancy finds, but we've got to get all. And again, find, you can do, you know, f name equals whatever. We can also have a find by ID. So we can get a specific employee based on their ID, which is really easy to write. We just have to do find by ID and give it the ID, just like we did for delete, exactly the same. And we have create. We didn't do any edits yet. We can do that next time. But that's going to be a really quick thing that only take like 5 minutes to go over as well, because Mongo makes it super easy. In fact, we have 5 minutes. I'm gonna do it now. So const edit employee. Press next. And we'll do this by ID. So const ID equals rec.body.id. Actually, I'm going to make this a query. Rec.query.id. I'm not going to worry about, you know, if there is no ID, then return that. We'll just assume that the user is correct here. And we'll use find by ID and update. So await employee model dot find by ID and update. And the update So this is pretty cool. We can give it a, well, the first thing has to be the ID. The second thing is the update query. So the update query is going to be just a regular JSON object that'll have whatever the new values are in there. So let's say I just want to change the last name of one of my records. I'll put L name Weinberg 2, the Weinberg name. And it will only update that specific field. It'll leave all the other ones alone. That's called an upsert. I'm sorry, that's not an upsert. That's a that's generally what a put request is for. It won't replace the entire thing with just L name Weinberg 2. It won't delete the other fields. It'll just update this specific field. So we're actually just going to do rec.body. So we're going to have it using both a body and a query. And of course, this will fail if there is no, actually, I'm not sure if this will throw or not if there is no employee with a specific ID. I guess we're about to find out, but that's all you need to do, which is pretty cool. We'll add this to our exports. We'll import it into app.js and we'll create a new endpoint for it. So app.put, edit employee. And we should be able to do that. So I have my employees endpoint. I'm just going to call that again to verify we have the up to date. Copy that ID. Edit employee. ID equals whatever this is. And in the body, we're going to change the L name to Weinberg 2 and also increment the age because I'm starting to accept how old I am, I guess, but not fully. And only those two records will be updated, or not records, properties. And I'll want to change this to put. Let me just make sure I changed it to put here. I did. Send the request. And I forgot to do a rest.send, so it's just going to hang forever because it's waiting for a response, which I am not providing because I forgot. Rest.send employee updated. Next. But just because it didn't send it back to Postman, and it restarted, so we got a socket hang up. But when we hit the employee's endpoint again, we're going to see that the record got updated. So age is now 28 and last name is now Weinberg 2. So that is editing. Again, super easy. Mongoose makes this really easy. We don't have to write up whole queries like, updates, table name, where name equal or ID equals whatever. Mongoose kind of has that all abstracted away from us in a nice way. And if I give it an ID that doesn't exist, I kind of want to see what happens. I'm pretty sure it throws, but don't quote me. So I'll just use Control Z to get that back. But I'll change this ID to something that doesn't exist, FF. And it might even say, yeah, employee updated, but there's nothing to update. So that's something that you may want to do an additional check for because it doesn't throw if it doesn't find it. But the original record will be the same. And then we can also do an update many. And that'll take in two parameters just like this, but the first one would actually be a query just like our find. So maybe I want to update everyone whose last name is Weinberg, and it'll update whatever keys we give it in the body. So yeah, that is pretty much all we need for Mongo, funny enough. Express and Mongo and the backend stuff is pretty easy compared to everything else we've done. So yeah, are there any questions over what we went over today? I'm hearing nothing, so I assume everyone's good to go. Everyone was able to make this happen on their end. If you got any questions, let us know next week or let us know in Slack and we'll get back to you and we'll see you next week.